Friends, Jenna, sinful celluloid, beverages. And this is take 2 of The Body Beneath. Yeah, I did this once already tonight, and it totally screwed up on my editor. We begin at a graveyard. A lady in red is putting flowers at a grave. She turns around to go. 3 green-faced ladies are there staring at her. We're gonna call them the Technicolor Witches. They descend upon her and do devious things. Cut 2. The apartment owned by Captain Turtleneck. He's waiting for his wife, the lady in red, to come home from the graveyard, and he gets a knock, knock, knock on the door. It's a reverend and his wife, a mute. Hey, can we come in out of the cold? Guess what? You're related to me, did you know that? Captain Turtleneck is like, no, I did not know that. Come in, let's have some tea. Reverend, super creepy, super long-winded, and super oblique about everything, is like, I've come to reopen All Souls Church. I'm staying at Carfax Abbey next door, and I'd really like to invite you and the missus to dinner. We have a lot to talk about because we're related. Did I mention that? We're related. The Reverend takes off. Wife comes home. She's a little bit swoony. The Technicolor Witches did something to her. Cut to Smarmy Guy and Beehive having sex. They finish, light up some schmirks, and have possibly the most insipid conversation that has ever been committed to film. He's like, guess what else I guessed about how much you love me? Oh, you're pregnant with my baby, aren't you? And she's like, you are so right. You know me so well. Smooch, smooch. She's like, listen, I could stay here banging you all day, but a reverend has come to town, and turns out he's my blood relative. He was very insistent that I come see him at Carfax Abbey. Meanwhile, a redhead is getting dressed to go out on a date. There's a knock, knock, knock at the door. Her maid goes downstairs to answer. The creepiest flower delivery man anyone ever saw is standing there with a corsage for her. The maid takes the delivery, turns around. The Technicolor Witches are at the foot of the stairs. They whisper nefarious plots into her ear. She takes the corsage upstairs. Redhead pricks her finger with the pin in the flower, which apparently was their plan all along, because when she gets bandaged up and takes off her date, the maid gets like a microscope slide, gets a blood sample from the pin, and waves it out the window where flower delivery guy is waiting with the Tricolor Witches. I am starting to believe he does not work for a florist. Got to Carfax Abbey. Beehive is there to meet the Reverend. He's just taken a midday nap with mute wife, and he drops some not-so-subtle hints about how he hates having to deal with the sunlight and being up during the day. It's quite obvious now that he's a vampire. Guess who busts in? Florist. Delivery guy. Guess what? He's got a hunchback. The Reverend comes downstairs with his mute wife, who just decides to, instead of talk, just knits. They get her a glass of sherry to kind of celebrate. She said, I'm getting married. Would you like to officiate the wedding? Oh yes, you're my blood relative. Did you know that we're related? You're part of a very strong bloodline. So over the centuries, it's become diluted. Guess what? The drink she's been drinking, sherry, has been poisoned. Flower shop hunchback comes in because she's passed out and drags her upstairs to a second-floor bedroom where she's going to become a prisoner. The Reverend, he's upstairs getting a blood transfusion. Apparently his blood pressure is super weak because of all this diluted through the generations blood that's flowing through his veins. A little too much inbreeding, not enough strong stock. Beehive wakes up. Reverend comes in his best creepy red robes. You are part of my bloodline. You are pregnant. We will raise your baby, turn him immortal, and then we will select gentlemen for you to impregnate you, to strengthen the bloodline. You will have multiple babies, we will turn them into multiple vampires, and you will basically sire a strong line of vampires going forward. And she's like, I'm gonna check out of this one, thanks. Can you let me go now? No, you're here forever. She swoons, passes out. He bites her neck. I guess he's gonna turn her into a vampire early. Back at Turtleneck Ranch, Wife's acting super weird. She's also wearing a scarf around her neck because guess what? She's been turned into a vampire by the Technicolor witches. She drugs her husband. He passes out. She lets the Technicolor witches and the Reverend in through the window. They drain him of his blood. He apparently was going to be part of this plot, but now that the Reverend's got old Preggers up there ready to just pop out some vampires, he doesn't need this guy anymore. Smarmy guy shows up at Carfax Abbey. The maid lies to him, says she left. Maid goes up to the Reverend and is like, I don't like lying to people. I'm gonna be a real thorn in your side. So he fires her. Knock, knock, knock on the door. It's old Smarmy. He's not going away. He goes to get a cigarette out of a case with silver. He notices he can't see the Reverend's reflection. He's a vampire! Want a cigarette? And closes the thing and kicks the guy out. He meets the maid outside. She brings him in through a side entrance. They find him out. The Reverend and the flower shop hunchback tie him up, put him in an upstairs room. Of course, that can't keep a good Smarmy down. He knocks a glass over with his face while he's rolling around on the ground trying to get loose, breaks it open, cuts his wrists loose, and starts skulking around the castle looking for Beehive. The Reverend makes a part of his master plan to let him in. They lock them both in Beehive's room. There's a 15-minute conversation about how it's so dramatic and they missed each other and smooch, smooch, smooch. Awful. Cut to the maid. They caught her too, tied her to a chair, and then the wife takes out the old knitting needles and jabs her through both of the eyes. Cut to redhead corsage. There's another knock, knock, knock at the door. Nobody's there when she goes to answer. Shuts the door, turns around. Those witches are back. They chloroform her, bring her back to old Carfax Abbey. Guess what? You're part of our bloodline, too. We already got somebody to have the babies, so we're just going to need you to be a blood bag and give us transfusions and keep us strong while we're repopulating the vampire bloodline. Redhead's like, not on board for that. I'm going to go. Actually, no, you're not going to go. You're going to stay right here and you're going to juice us up. Reverend, he's getting topped off with some new blood. He's like, listen, Technicolor witches, all of my plans are not going the way I want them to because I'm a terrible planner. Tonight's our big feast. Get everything ready. I've got a new plan. We're really gonna ruffle some feathers. Commence feast. Everyone attends from the graveyards and they're wearing their finest pointy hats and ribbons and tinsel, and the Reverend comes down wearing his best curtains that are adorned with glittery duct tape. Some lady who's dressed in green, she looks like Ursula the Sea Witch. He starts spouting off about how, you don't think we can stay here at Highgate, but this has been our home since BC, not AD, BC. You want to move us across a continent? America's full of pimps and prostitutes and the scum of the earth, and America's the worst. The guy's like, listen, I'm not going to take any of your lip, Ursula. We can't stay here. They're going to find us out in London. Maybe we'll try Canada. Reverend orders Beehive to be killed and Smarmy to be laid out next to her so when he wakes up he can take the blame, I guess. The next morning, Beehive wakes up. She's got a knitting needle through the chest, but she didn't die because apparently the Reverend forgot that he bit her like yesterday. She's a vampire. You can't just kill her with sticking a needle in her stomach. She wakes up, gets a little, first thing in the morning snack off of Smarmy's neck, turning him into a vampire as well. They look outside on Highgate Cemetery, take in the vista. Now everything we see is ours since they took off. Great, we're gonna have a vampire baby. We'll just vampire shenanigans. Scene. Like, there are some movies that are good, bad, and then there's this. Minutes and minutes of overacting drama and conversation to get from like a door stoop to the staircase. When they get to the stuff you do need to know, it's so ridiculous that you sit there thinking about how a lady looks like Ursula the Sea Witch. If you have a friend who recommends this movie to you, cut them off from your life completely, immediately. This is Jenna. Sinful Celluloid. The Body Beneath. Not my best beverage, but then again, this wasn't my best movie, so it's a really bad drink.